Hello, Wandering Beekeeper. Welcome. This is the Element Works. This is a smithy that I located and have converted for my own purposes. We have the usual furnace out here. I haven't actually had as much use for it in ElementalCraft as I have in some other mods. It's not really requiring as much refining here. Most of it's dealing with the true elements: earth, air, fire, and water. This is ElementalCraft. We are going to be looking at what it does. Let's start with the book, Elementopedia. It's pretty simple as far as the basic stuff. There are some initial things you need to be able to make: inert crystal, which you mine, and then turn into contained crystal, which then becomes elemental crystals. White rock is pretty much the same as living rock in Botania. It is a foundational element used to build most of the equipment. Springaline is useful, but is not as vital. Shards are found all over the place. You find these raw shards dropped by a lot of mobs and so forth. They can be combined into powerful shards. Sometimes you find powerful shards. Those get fed into your system. They are fragments of elemental power. Save them up. You will feed them into your system. The pipe cover frame is a facade, don't worry about it. The element holder is how you carry true elements around with you. I have 4 of them. Excuse me. I have 4 of them. One for each of the true elements. These are energy batteries. They serve the same function as the greater band of mana for Botania. They go in your inventory and they hold the magical energy that you will use to cast your spells. Now let's get through a few basics. The Magician's Workbench for mana and artifice is here because it's just so darned useful. It remembers all these things that I have been building, and we'll be looking at some of these in a few minutes. But right now, let's close the door because it's getting dark out. So you will see this same basic setup in a couple of other places. This is a smithy building that's generated by one of the mods that I've simply taken over and cleaned out and modified. So I've got my bed. I've cleaned out the campfires and blast furnaces that weren't actually doing anything. Put in an anvil. The anvil is needed in order to install spells on your focus. Let's just jump ahead a little bit, because once you have a focus, which is basically a wand, to install new spells in it, you drop them here and hammer them in at the anvil. Creating spells in Elemental Works is somewhat chancy. You use a spell desk and you drop paper and elemental crystals into it and see what you get. It's very much like an enchanting table in vanilla Minecraft. Not a lot of control. This is the big processing altar. You'll see the same sort of array in a lot of other mods. The main altar, the pure infuser, this is where you build your big artifacts. Pedestals for each of the 4 elements. These are energy suppliers. Material components don't usually go on them. Sometimes do, but not always. You don't have as much of an emphasis on material components. Instead, it's on having the elements you need. And that's where these reservoirs come in. These are big tanks. These are really big tanks. You'll be building mostly these small jars in order to hold your true elements, to collect them and hold them and carry them. The reservoirs you're probably only going to build 4 of ever, 1 of each element. They hold a whacking lot. This is an evaporator. It is a separate device. It goes on top of a jar or a reservoir and evaporates shards down into the container. So those powerful air shards are being slowly dissolved and fed in to the main reservoir, which can then be piped over to the smaller jars. This pipe is set to extract. This jar is powering a gem crystallizer. There is a diamond in there and a number of air shards, and we have air power. And slowly, this diamond is being recrystallized into an air gem. It will take a while. That is a true air source. You find them out in the wild. There are receptacles that can be made so that you can capture them and carry them and put them where you need them. I placed this particular air source atop an improved collector atop a jar. So the jar is full of air. The collector extracts it from the source. The source is effectively an infinite supply, but it is very slow. It takes a lot of time. Hence the collection. Also hence the evaporator, so that I have 2 different methods of getting element into the reservoir to power the system. This is just an element binder. It is a more powerful form of an infuser. It allows me to infuse to bind elements into items and make medium power artifacts. The infuser makes low power artifacts. The pure infuser makes the big ones. Same setup over here. We don't have any water shards in there. Let's go get some water shards. Here are some water shards. You find these just laying around. They're mob drops and so on and so forth. You find them here and there. We'll load them into the evaporator and we see particles. Those shards are now being evaporated and will help fill up the water supply, which is pretty low. Water is not doing as well as earth or fire. There we go. Earth over here doing pretty well. Powerful shards going in. We have our infuser. We have to arrange slightly differently because of the doorway. The binder goes over on that side. The extractor goes off this side with the true earth source that has been located and carried in. Just do a quick sleep so I can go outside safely. This is still a survival world. It's not safe to go out without a weapon in your hand. I'm not going to be showing you the pure infuser right now. But I mean, you've seen this sort of altar in other mods. You know how this works. You lay the catalyst on it, you fire it up, and you get some special effects. The spell desk is over here tucked under here because it's just not as useful. Spell paper goes here. Crystals go here. Remember those inert crystals I showed you that you mine? Yeah, if you wrap them in gold and then soak them in a true element, they become elemental crystals, and they go here and determine what spells become available, like an enchanting table. Experience level and lapis have been replaced with elemental gems and elemental crystals. We go back out and let's go have a look at a couple of things. This is a solar element synthesizer. It has burned off its lens. Sadly, it's used it up. Let's get another lens here. And You make a lens according to the element you want to collect. You pop it into the infuser, into the synthesizer, and it points up at the sun. And we are soaking fire off the sun into this jar. No wonder the lens burns out in a short time. You can collect other elements with the solar synthesizer as well. I'm collecting fire because it seems really the obvious thing to do. This is a shrine. Shrines are a very big deal in ElementWorks. They are how you do a lot of your automation. This particular shrine is a harvesting shrine. It will harvest anything reaching maturity within its area. The problem being that it harvests by breaking the plant and not by properly cropping. And so you have to have a planting shrine as well. I haven't put in a planting shrine. Theoretically, there is a planting upgrade that can be put on these, but I haven't been able to get it to work. And of course, the shrine must be supplied with the appropriate true element. I have a self-filling jar here to make sure it stays full. Put a source on top of it. Pipe out to the shrine, and let's just pull this out. Here is our, let's see, we'll sneak and put it on ripening. Ripening draws water. You can see a water symbol next to my crosshairs and a check mark that tells me I have enough water in my battery to be able to cast the spell. So we'll ripen that, and there it goes. The shrine harvests it, and then just leaves it. The automation in ElementWorks in 1.16.5 leaves a bit to be desired. I would need a second shrine to replant, and a third, or an upgrade, on this shrine, which I haven't been able to get to work, or in another shrine to do the collection, and it just gets to be a little much. Especially when you see what Ars Nouveau can do with this sort of thing. Yeah. So that's pretty much ElementWorks in a nutshell. There's a fair amount to it. It goes through a lot. It will do a fair amount. The pure infuser will make all sorts of interesting things. There is an ordered sorter and an instrument output retriever for automation, so that you could theoretically gather the output from the shrine and order and sort it into storage and so forth. The shrines, there are a bunch of them. There's the harvest shrine here. There's a growth shrine. So on and so forth. And then there are upgrades for range and capacity and making it a silk touch and so forth. Theoretically, there is a planting upgrade, but again, I'm not having it. I don't know what I'm doing wrong. Spells are pretty simple. There are not a lot. They are useful. Fireball, obviously. Everybody needs a fireball. Ripening, which we just saw. Some other combat spells like Inferno. Tree Fall, which is your one-chop drop. The usual stuff. It's reasonably well integrated. ElementalCraft is reasonably well integrated. It has a nice aesthetic. I like the white rock and rod and glass approach that they've taken here. It's a nice, spare, and yet attractive aesthetic. So I like that. It would be nice if the documentation were a little better. And it would be nice if the shrines were maybe a little easier to use, a little more integrated. I'm going to look again at ElementalCraft in 1.18, and we'll see. I'm going to look at, well, wait a minute. We're in 1.18, aren't we? This is the 1.18 world. Dagnabbit. Okay, well, I'm going to look again at ElementalCraft in 1.19 if they go to it, but I think it deserves another look, and I think it deserves more development and better integration on the shrines and automation. I think it's a good approach and was certainly enjoyable to work through. So, that's my opinion. Get your own. I'm the Wandering Beekeeper. Thank you for joining me.